Hello everyone, I'm back again with another update. Today is we're in the middle of August here of 2023. I am on a walk on Route 18 in Virginia, road I live on. And still working this full-time job, which again, next year I will be eligible for a retirement check. I am planning a potential long-distance hike or bike tour, thinking of the AT, starting at Katahdin or potentially even further up north than that and going south late next summer. And my girlfriend is planning on playing a supportive role. We've got a vehicle that we could sleep in. She does have an offer on her house which will enable us to pay the vehicle off and get a new roof on the house. And so hopefully that will go through. We are in the final processes of completing that paperwork for that. Yeah, I mean, being a cook in a restaurant is not an easy job. I've never worked a line before, because every time in the past I never was given really a chance. I did cook in the military for 3 years. I basically took this job to get me to next June, or if I can get enough money saved up even earlier, maybe even by the first of the year I'll retire if I got enough money saved. But it's not something that I want to do for an extended period. It will get me by until I have the financial means to retire. I will again be eligible next year, middle of next year, for a monthly check, so I'm looking forward to that. So getting into the talk about the weather, my son did recently graduate college, but I have not heard anything about him finding a job yet. I'm concerned. There is a glut of meteorologists out there. So we'll just have to see. Hopefully somebody will hire him. If nobody has yet, I haven't heard anything about him getting a job as a meteorologist. I'm really hoping that there's not such a glut out there that he's going to have a hard time finding something. Especially with the National Weather Service, which there are just very few entry-level openings out there, which is what he was hoping for. And many other places, they want somebody that's going to go broadcast the weather, and he's not interested in doing that. But getting into the actual weather right now, it's part of the reason I never became a meteorologist, because I felt that a degree would not guarantee me an actual job. I felt I needed hands-on experience, and that is why I joined the Marines with the hope that I put in to be a meteorologist in the military, and they never gave it to me. I ended up with electronics. I failed it. I ended up being a cook. Thus, I never became a meteorologist, despite having all kinds of knowledge on the subject, which I gained through my own efforts. In the 1 year of college I did go to the meteorology course, pretty much I already knew everything they taught in the course, but I taught myself. But getting into the actual recent weather, in my last video I had mentioned that I feel that in 10 years hurricanes are going to become a thing of the past. The Atlantic season so far has yielded just about nothing. We're into the middle of August. Yeah, they keep talking of disturbances that are threats to development. But again, the energy isn't there anymore. Hurricanes need an enormous amount of heat to form, to develop into storms, and they have a threshold where you cross a certain line, they explode into hurricanes. You don't get to that line, nothing happens with the disturbance. I think the Atlantic has already reached that point where it's going to be very difficult for them, even with help, to get a storm started up, like starting a lawnmower. You pull the cord, the spark starts the motor, gets it going. Once it's going, it goes. And that's how it works. Well, there's not enough gasoline left in that Atlantic. It's out. They're going to have a very hard time because they've done it so much there. Why? Because as I said in my last video, the trend in hurricanes has been downward since 2007, and they were starting to disappear. It does not fit the narrative. Global warming that says they're supposed to get worse and more powerful and more frequent. They had to come up with some sort of technology, and it worked in the beginning. Because most of the storms, disturbances, even though they weren't developing into hurricanes, were just below the threshold, where with a little bit of help, it would get pushed over that threshold with a disturbance, and it would form into a hurricane, and they felt they had it. The problem is, their plan, every disturbance that's artificially created, every hurricane, is stealing heat out of that ocean. Stealing heat energy that should not have been taken out naturally. It's like a drug. In the beginning, it has a huge effect, but then as time goes on, the effect wears off. Every disturbance that's coming off Africa now, I've been watching, they have tried and tried and tried to bomb it with energy from this technology. It's not working anymore because they've taken too much heat out of that water. They cannot get these disturbances over the threshold anymore. This is why I say, if this continues, of course they're continuing to bomb it. What this is doing is it's creating more clouds, creating more rainfall in areas over the ocean that should be getting that sunlight to warm the water up. It's not getting it anymore. It's always covered with clouds. It normally would not have been there. I looked at a satellite photo from 1973, and one thing I noticed that was remarkable was the absence of clouds compared to now in these regions. In the Pacific, their so-called El Nino should be firing up a lot of hurricanes off of Mexico. And they have been trying to artificially get a number of them going, but most of their efforts again have failed. There has not been much activity other than Dora. Dora, I believe they got lucky with, because that was one storm they managed to get the motor going with, and where Dora moved is an area that has not had many storms lately, not many disturbances. So there's still some fuel left in that section of the Pacific that if they got the motor going, the storm would go on its own. And here's a turtle. Looks like it got hit there. You can see on the left it's got gashed. It must have been injured or hit maybe by a car or something. It's still alive. But getting back to what I was talking about, this season NOAA actually updated the prediction to above average. They claim record warm Atlantic sea surface temperatures are the cause of their prediction change to an above average season. I don't see it. The heat isn't there. They're lying. The ocean is definitely not record warm right now. If it was, we'd be seeing hurricane after hurricane forming in the Atlantic right now. I've seen years like 1979 where we got storm after storm off the Cape Verde Islands forming on them naturally in August even. This isn't happening. 2005, the year we got Katrina, the oceans were genuinely warm that year, but then they began to cool. It's a cycle. If the oceans are cooling, it doesn't fit the narrative. So they're going to lie about it. And NOAA claims the Atlantic Ocean is record warm right now. It's never been this warm in history. So we're going to get an above average season. They're claiming that there's a huge El Nino in the Pacific. I question whether there even is one right now. Because with a genuine El Nino, you get a lot of tropical systems forming in the Eastern Pacific. We have only seen a couple this year so far. The Atlantic, again, it remains to be seen. And my prediction is, if the trend continues, we're not going to have any more tropical systems over in the Earth anymore forming. Nothing will ever get over the threshold anymore. You might have disturbances. That's all they'll ever be. And that's been the way it's been. That was the way it was last year until we hit the middle of September. Nothing formed really. Because nothing ever was, they were never able to get anything over that threshold. Now, solar cycle 25, and that's another thing they're lying about. They're trying to compare this cycle to 23 on spaceweather.com. I saw a recent post that was saying this cycle is going to be as strong as 23 was back in 2000. And that cycle had an X45 flare. This cycle so far, the most strongest flare was not even an X2. And they're trying to compare this cycle to 23. Cycle 24, the strongest flare in that cycle was an X6. So far this cycle, we've only been able to put out not even an X2. With X flares, the lower the number is, the weaker the flare. X45 is extremely powerful. X1 or 2 is not really having much punch to it. But they're trying to compare this cycle to 23. Why? Because a dimming sun or a less active sun does not fit with their narrative. They know deep down that less active sun is going to potentially cool our climate or counteract their global warming narrative. They're even going as far as lying about this solar cycle to try to make it look like it's more powerful than it is. The latest sunspot count was down to well under 100, but they're claiming it's going to go up to the levels we saw in 23. I feel we've already reached the peak of the solar cycle. Whether it has a second peak in a couple of years or not remains to be seen. But I feel we've peaked out at 150 sunspots. It's probably going to either start going back down now, or it will go down to about 100, plateau, maybe go back up in a couple of years and then fall off, which would make it somewhere between solar cycle 20 and the last one, or closer to the last one, I'd say, for strength. And cycle 20 was weak enough to induce a period of cooling on the planet, which was back in 1970. So, unless this cycle does go up to levels of 23, the overall trend of cooling is going to continue for the next decade or longer. It might slow down a little bit because we are in a max, but it will not be enough to change the trend. So that is going to be it for this video. I hope you found this discourse interesting. If you want to do a fact check on what I say, the info is out there. I do my own research and make sure what I'm saying is true, is the truth. So enjoy your day. I will be back soon.